She was always the kind of student people rarely noticed. She walked into class quietly, sat in the same corner seat, and kept her head down as if she was trying to make herself invisible. She wasn't unfriendly, just gentle, soft-spoken, and always deep in her own world. Most teachers assumed she was shy, maybe even unsure of herself. But the truth was something different. She simply preferred silence over noise and peace over attention. And behind that calm face, behind those quiet eyes, she held something she never spoke about, a love for the piano that had been part of her life since she was very young. Every day after school, while other kids ran outside or hung around with friends, she walked home, placed her bag on the floor, and went straight to the old piano sitting in the corner of her small living room. It wasn't a beautiful instrument. Some of the paint was scratched off, a few keys made dull sounds, and the stool wobbled slightly. But she loved that piano more than anything she owned. It had belonged to her grandmother, who used to play soft songs in the evenings, while she listened quietly as a child. Those memories were her comfort, her safe place, and her reason for playing. Her parents didn't have much money. They worked long hours, doing whatever jobs they could find to support the household. But they always tried to give her small bits of encouragement: a warm cup of tea during practice, a gentle, tired smile from the doorway, even when they were exhausted, a simple, "You're doing well, keep going," before heading back to work. They didn't understand the piano, but they understood her passion. At school, though, nobody knew she played. She never brought it up, and music class was the one subject where she tried not to draw any attention. She played what she needed to and nothing more, always keeping her emotions hidden behind straight posture and careful movements. But her music teacher had an eye for detail. She noticed the way the girl's fingers rested naturally on the keys, the way she played warm-ups with unusual accuracy, and the way her hands moved with a softness that wasn't taught, it was felt. One morning during class, the music teacher asked the students to play a simple melody, something everyone had practiced for weeks. One by one, the students took turns. Some rushed through it, some stumbled, some played with confidence, and some struggled nervously. When it was her turn, she walked slowly to the piano, sat down, and took a quiet breath. She didn't think anyone was paying attention to her. Most of the class never did. But as she started playing, the room seemed to change. Her notes weren't loud or dramatic. They were gentle, careful, and clean, each one fitting perfectly into the next. It wasn't that the piece was hard. It was the way she played it that made the teacher raise her eyebrows. After class, the teacher watched her longer than usual. She wanted to ask the girl about her piano experience, maybe even test her with something more difficult. But she didn't want to pressure her. Instead, she simply observed, noting every small detail over the next few days. And each day, she saw something new. Tiny hints of hidden skill. A talent she was almost certain the girl herself didn't realize she had. One afternoon, when most of the students had left for lunch, the teacher asked her to stay behind for a moment. She approached slowly, wondering if she had done something wrong. But the teacher smiled kindly and said she wanted to hear her play again, something a little different this time. The girl hesitated. Her heart started beating faster. She wasn't used to being singled out. The teacher placed a sheet of music on the stand, a piece much harder than what they had been learning in class. The girl stared at it, unsure if she could do it. Her hands felt suddenly heavy, and for a moment she thought of saying she couldn't, but the teacher's gentle tone gave her courage. "Try it," she said. "Just do what you can." She placed her fingers on the keys, took another quiet breath, and began. The first few notes were slow, careful, almost uncertain. She was trying to understand the flow, the pattern, the feeling behind the music. Then something inside her clicked. Her fingers found the rhythm. The melody wrapped around her like a familiar voice. Without realizing it, she began to play with more confidence. Not perfect, but filled with emotion. The teacher listened closely, surprised, impressed, and slightly stunned. When the girl finished, she looked up nervously, expecting corrections. But all she saw was a thoughtful expression. "Where did you learn to play like that?" the teacher asked softly. The girl shrugged lightly. "At home," she whispered. play." The teacher wanted to ask more, but the girl looked uncomfortable, so she didn't push further. Instead, she simply nodded and thanked her. But from that day on, the teacher viewed her differently, not as a quiet, average student, but as someone with hidden depth. Still, not everyone saw it. Other teachers barely remembered her name. Students talked around her as if she wasn't there. She wasn't bullied, mistreated, or disliked. She was simply overlooked, like a small detail in a big picture. But that quiet presence hid something powerful. Something even she didn't fully understand. There were days she wondered if being quiet made her fade into the background too much. She wondered if anyone at school would ever truly see her. Sometimes she wished she could be more confident, speak louder, or show her real self. But every time she thought about trying, her voice got stuck. She went back to silence. The piano, though there, she was someone else. When she played, she felt free. She didn't need to talk. She didn't need to explain who she was. The music spoke for her. The melodies carried her emotions, her fears, her hopes. Everything she couldn't express in words. One rainy evening, she sat at the piano after finishing her homework. The house was quiet except for the soft tapping of rain against the windows. Her parents were working late again, so she played to fill the silence. Her fingers moved slowly at first, exploring sounds, letting the notes guide her. Then she slipped into a piece she had been practicing secretly for weeks. Something far more difficult than anything at school. She played with her eyes half closed, feeling the music flow through her. She didn't know her neighbor was standing outside the window, listening, completely taken by the beauty of her playing. The neighbor didn't interrupt. He simply listened for a few minutes before quietly walking away, amazed that such talent was hidden inside someone so quiet. The next day at school, nothing seemed different. She walked in quietly, sat in her usual seat, and listened to the rustling sounds of students chatting and laughing around her. But her music teacher saw her enter the room and made a small mental note. She had plans, not anything harsh or unfair, but something that might help the girl discover her own strength. The teacher wanted to test her limits, not to push her down, but to see how far her natural ability could go. She had seen many students over the years, some loud, some proud, some overly confident. But rarely did she meet someone whose talent was so natural, almost effortless, yet so deeply hidden. Over the next week, the teacher introduced slightly harder exercises in class. Nothing too obvious, just little challenges to see who could handle them. Most students complained. Some tried and failed. But the quiet girl didn't complain. She didn't seem to notice the challenge at all. She simply played as though music was another language she had always spoken. Every new task she completed with quiet grace. Every difficult pattern she played without showing frustration. Her classmates barely paid attention. But the teacher watched everything. There was one moment when even the class troublemaker paused to stare. During a rhythm test, the teacher tapped out a complicated pattern on the desk and asked the students to repeat it. Most struggled. Some tapped too slow, others too fast, some completely offbeat. But when the girl took her turn, she repeated the pattern perfectly, without hesitating, without doubting herself. It wasn't just accuracy. It was the calmness she carried while doing it. The teacher decided then that she would set up a real challenge. Something that would push the girl in a way she had never been pushed before. Something that might reveal the full extent of her talent. But the girl had no idea any of this was happening. She continued living her quiet routine, unaware that someone finally saw her not as the invisible student in the corner, but as someone with extraordinary potential at home. She continued practicing on the worn-out piano, unaware that her life was about to change. Music flowed from her fingertips, the way water flowed down a stream, soft, natural, and effortless. And with every note she played, she unknowingly prepared herself for the moment, when the entire school would discover what she had been hiding all along. For now, though, she remained the quiet girl in the back row, the one no one expected much from, the one who walked through the hallways unnoticed, the one who blended into the background. But soon, that was all going to change. And it would begin with a challenge she never asked for, one that would test her limits, reveal her strength, and shock everyone who thought they already knew who she was. the days after the music teacher first noticed. Her hidden skill felt strange to her. She continued attending classes like always, moving quietly through the hallways, keeping to her routine, speaking only when someone spoke to her first. Nothing on the outside looked different, but inside the music room, something subtle had changed. The teacher watched her more closely now, paying attention to the way she handled each new exercise. The way her fingers moved without fear, the way she listened so carefully to every instruction. It wasn't the kind of attention that makes a student nervous. It was the kind that comes from genuine curiosity. Still, the girl didn't know any of this. She thought she was just blending in like usual, doing what she always did. She didn't notice the teacher's thoughtful looks or the small smile. The teacher hid every time the girl played something better than the rest of the class. One morning, the teacher walked into the classroom carrying a few sheets of new music. Most students noticed right away because the papers looked different from the usual assignments. The notes were more complicated, the lines longer, the patterns unfamiliar. Some students groaned softly, already guessing it meant more work. She, however, simply sat quietly, waiting for instructions. The teacher explained that these were special practice sheets designed to test the students' rhythm, timing, and control. The explanation sounded plain, but the truth was slightly different. The teacher wanted to see what the quiet girl would do when faced with something difficult, something that would make most students struggle. The class began working through the exercises. Some students made jokes to hide their confusion. Some looked frustrated from the start. A few tried hard but kept losing their place. The girl moved slowly, reading each line carefully. She didn't rush. She didn't complain. She simply focused, letting her hands explore the keys with patience. At first, she stumbled a little. The teacher expected that, but instead of getting discouraged, she relaxed her shoulders, took a careful breath, and tried again. Her fingers found the rhythm more naturally this time. The note patterns became familiar faster than they should have for someone her age, and the more she practiced, the more confident she became. The teacher stood near her, pretending to check on other students, but watching her closely from the corner of her eye. She saw how quickly the girl understood the structure of the music. She didn't just memorize notes, she felt them. At one point, the teacher asked the class if anyone wanted to demonstrate the rhythm work. Most students looked down, avoiding eye contact. She sat still, assuming she would never be chosen. But the teacher called her name. She looked up, surprised, almost confused. Her heart beat faster. She walked to the piano quietly, feeling the weight of all the students' eyes for the first time in a long while. She placed her hands gently on the keys. Wondering if they could see how nervous she was, she started playing the rhythm exercise. The beginning was slow, steady, careful. Then she moved through the pattern with growing confidence. She finished with quiet grace, then stood up quickly and walked back to her seat without looking at anyone. The room stayed quiet for a moment, not the heavy kind of silence, but the surprised kind. A few students looked at her differently now, not with jealousy, not with admiration, but with curiosity. The teacher wrote something on her clipboard before moving on. Over the next few days, the teacher introduced more challenging exercises. Each one was tougher than the last. And each time the girl approached the task, the same way, calmly, patiently, without fear of failing. She didn't know she was being tested. She didn't know this was part of a plan. She simply thought the teacher wanted everyone to try harder, but quietly. Behind her gentle expression, something else was happening. A part of her was beginning to grow. A feeling she rarely experienced. A tiny spark of confidence. It wasn't big. It wasn't obvious. But it was there at home. She continued practicing on the old piano. The worn keys still made soft, uneven sounds. The wood still creaked a little under her fingers. But none of that bothered her. She loved the way the notes filled the room, the way the sound danced around the walls, the way her heart relaxed every time she played. Her parents sometimes watched her from the doorway as she practiced late into the evening. They didn't say much, but their quiet presence made the room feel warm. Even when they were tired, even when work had drained all their energy, they listened. And she always felt safe knowing they were there. One evening, After practicing a difficult section of a new song, she sat back, stretched her fingers, and let out a long breath. She didn't usually push herself so hard, but something inside her urged her to keep going. She wanted to get better. She wanted to make the music sound the way she heard it in her head, smooth, full of emotion, alive. She didn't know that at that very moment, her music teacher was sitting at home thinking about her. The teacher had reviewed all the class notes and noticed how consistently the girl handled each challenge with grace. She was sure now this girl had something rare. The teacher decided that after the next week, she would give the girl a new challenge, something far more difficult than anything she had seen so far. Not to overwhelm her, but to reveal her true potential. The next day at school, something unexpected happened. A small group of her classmates who usually ignored her began whispering when she walked past. It wasn't harsh whispering. It wasn't mean. They were simply curious about the quiet girl the teacher kept choosing. She didn't know what they were saying, but she felt their eyes following her. It made her nervous. She walked faster, hoping no one would ask her anything. She wasn't used to being noticed. During music class, the teacher handed out a new sheet, harder than any before. This time, the pattern was sharp. The jumps between notes were wide, and the rhythm shifted in ways that could confuse even a confident student. Many sighed loudly. One student muttered, "Why does she make everything harder?" Another complained that the assignment was impossible. She simply stared at the sheet in front of her, trying to understand its structure. The first few lines confused her. She felt a little lost. She wondered if she had finally reached her limit. But the teacher, standing behind her, gently said, "Just take it slow. You don't need to finish it all today." She nodded and began. Her fingers moved cautiously at first. She made mistakes. She paused. She tried again. Slowly, the pattern started making sense. She repeated it until her hands remembered the movements on their own. The teacher was impressed, not because she played it flawlessly, but because she didn't give up. She didn't rush. She didn't get frustrated. She simply stayed calm. The more she practiced, the more her classmates noticed her quiet focus. Some began to respect her. Some felt confused by how she improved so fast. A few even tried harder themselves. Inspired in a small way by her calm determination, near the end of class, the teacher asked her to stay for a moment again. Her stomach tightened with worry. She nodded and waited while the other students left. The teacher gently closed the classroom door and walked toward the piano. She placed a new piece of music on the stand. This one wasn't just difficult, it was something meant for older, more advanced players. The girl stared at it, frozen. Her voice trembled slightly. "This is too hard for me." The teacher shook her head softly. "I don't think it is. I think you can do it." She didn't believe it. The notes looked impossible. The timing looked confusing. Her hands felt suddenly cold. She wasn't used to challenges like this, but the teacher smiled calmly and said, "Try the first line." "That's all, just the first line." She placed her fingers on the keys. Her hand shook at first. She pressed the first note, then the second, slowly, awkwardly. She paused, breathed, tried again. Her hands searched for the right flow. It wasn't perfect, not even close. But the teacher heard something familiar under the tense notes. The same spark of emotion she had heard the first time the girl played. After a few minutes, the girl looked up, embarrassed. "I can't do it right." The teacher shook her head gently. "You will. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will. And I want you to keep trying." The girl nodded quietly. She felt unsure, but also strangely motivated. Someone believed in her. Someone thought she could do something she didn't think she was ready for. On her way home, she replayed the moment in her mind. The teacher's gentle voice, the look of belief, the difficult notes she had struggled with. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement, something she had never felt from school before. That night, when she sat at her old piano, she didn't go straight to her usual comfort pieces. She took out the new sheet the teacher gave her, placed it carefully on the stand, and stared at it for a long moment. She felt overwhelmed, nervous, unsure, but she also felt a pull inside her. A quiet voice telling her to keep going, She touched the first key, then the second. Then she tried the first line again and again and again. She made mistakes each time, but she also grew more familiar with the path her fingers needed to take. Hours passed without her noticing. The room grew darker, the air cooler, the sounds outside quieter, but she kept practicing. The music wasn't perfect yet, but it was slowly becoming clearer. She didn't know it at that moment, but this was the beginning of something much bigger than she had imagined. Something that would push her, test her, and eventually reveal the kind of skill that even the teachers didn't expect. For now, she was just a quiet girl practicing on an old piano, trying to make sense of difficult notes. But soon, very soon, those notes would lead her somewhere she never thought she would go. The morning of the performance day arrived much sooner than she wanted. She didn't even know why the school had arranged this special event. All she knew was that the music teacher had made an announcement the week before, saying that a few selected students would need to perform in front of several teachers. It wasn't a competition. It wasn't an exam. It was just something the school did once a year to see how well the students had progressed. Most of the class groaned when they heard about it. Some students were excited, some nervous, and a few didn't care at all. She, however, felt her stomach twist the moment her teacher said her name as one of the participants. She had never performed in front of anyone except her parents, and even then it was usually late at night, when the house was almost silent. The thought of playing in front of teachers, dozens of eyes watching her, judging her, terrified her more than she wanted to admit. Still, she didn't complain. She simply nodded when the teacher assigned her a piece to practice. It wasn't the hardest piece, but it wasn't easy either. It had tricky timing and soft emotional shifts that required confidence. The kind of confidence she didn't always feel. Every day after school, she practiced on the old piano at home. She played slowly at first, repeating the difficult parts again and again until her hands remembered the flow. Sometimes her fingers slipped. Sometimes she played too fast. Sometimes she got frustrated and had to stop for a moment. But she always came back to the keys. Her parents noticed she was practicing more than usual. Her mother placed warm tea beside her without saying much. Her father adjusted the unsteady piano stool so it wouldn't wobble so much. They didn't know exactly what the performance was for, but they could tell it was important to her. On the day of the performance, she woke up earlier than usual. She felt uneasy, nervous, even a little sick from worry. She stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair slowly, staring at her reflection as if she could find courage hidden somewhere in her own eyes. She whispered to herself, "You'll be okay," even though she wasn't sure she believed it. At school, the hallways buzzed with energy. Students hurried around with sheet music in their hands, some humming notes under their breath, others pacing nervously. She walked quietly to the music room, holding her music folder close to her chest. When she entered, she noticed something different. All the teachers from the arts department were there, seated in neat rows, talking softly among themselves. A few had clipboards. A few had pens ready in their hands. She swallowed hard. Her music teacher approached her with a calm smile. "Just do your best," she said softly. "That's all you need to do." But doing her best felt much harder when her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Students performed one by one. Some played confidently, some hesitated, some smiled brightly at the teachers. Some finished quickly and rushed back to their seats. She watched each performance, feeling her heart beat faster with each passing minute. Her turn was coming closer. When her name was finally called, she felt her knees grow weak. She stood up slowly, clutching her folder a little too tightly. Her legs felt stiff, as if they weren't entirely under her control. She took small steps toward the piano at the front of the room. The room fell into a hush. The teachers looked at her with polite curiosity. They didn't expect much. She was the quiet student, the one who rarely spoke, the one who blended into the background. No one thought she would do anything extraordinary. She sat down at the piano bench, placing her folder on the stand. She adjusted the seat gently, her hands trembling slightly. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. Then she placed her fingers on the keys. The first few notes came out, soft, almost too soft. She wasn't playing badly, just carefully, too carefully. She was scared of making mistakes. Her fingers hesitated. Her shoulders were tense. The beginning of the piece felt shaky, unsure. But then something shifted. She remembered her teacher's gentle encouragement. She remembered the long nights practicing alone in the dim light of her living room. She remembered the warmth of her parents' tired smiles. And she remembered the feeling she always had at home, the feeling that the piano was the one place she didn't need to be afraid. She took a quiet breath and let her shoulders relax. Her fingers began moving with more confidence, as if they suddenly remembered who she really was. The melody grew stronger, smoother, more expressive. She felt the music flowing through her, guiding her hands with a rhythm she had practiced countless times. The teachers leaned forward slightly. She didn't notice them. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing because the music felt like home. As she moved deeper into the piece, the room grew quieter. Even the distant sounds from the hallway seemed to disappear. Every note she played carried emotion, soft, gentle warmth, mixed with quiet strength. Her eyes remained slightly unfocused, as if she was somewhere else entirely. By the time she reached the middle section, one she used to struggle with the most, her fingers moved with unexpected confidence. Her timing was perfect. Her expression was natural. She played not just with skill, but with heart. A few teachers exchanged surprised looks. They hadn't expected this. She wasn't just good. She was exceptional when she reached the final part of the piece. Her hands flowed smoothly across the keys. She ended with a soft, lingering note that hovered in the air for a brief moment before fading into silence. She lifted her fingers slowly, almost unsure if she was truly done. Her chest rose and fell as she tried to catch her breath. She looked up at the teachers nervously, expecting criticism or polite applause. But for a moment, the room just stayed silent. It wasn't the uncomfortable kind of silence. It was the stunned kind, the silence that comes when people are too surprised to react then. Suddenly, the teachers began clapping. Not loudly, not dramatically, but sincerely. She blinked in confusion. She didn't know how good she had been. She didn't understand how deeply her music had touched the room. She only felt embarrassment, as if she had done something wrong by letting herself get carried away. She stood up quickly, gathering her sheet music, and walked back to her seat. Her hands were shaking again, but now for a different reason. As she sat down, she felt someone tap her shoulder lightly. It was one of her classmates, whispering, "That was really good." Another classmate nodded in agreement. She didn't know what to say. She simply lowered her head and whispered, "Thank you." Her music teacher watched her closely from across the room. She had known the girl had potential, but even she was shocked by how much emotion and skill she showed during the performance. She made a note on her clipboard, not something small, not something simple. She wrote a comment she rarely wrote for students: exceptional, natural talent, needs bigger challenges. After the performance session ended, the students were dismissed. She gathered her things slowly, wanting to leave before anyone tried to talk to her again. She didn't feel ready for attention. She never had. But as she stepped toward the door, one of the senior teachers approached her gently. "Your playing was beautiful," the teacher said kindly. "You have something special. Keep practicing." The girl nodded shyly. "Thank you," she whispered. She walked out of the room with her heart still pounding. But this time, there was something new inside that beating, something warm, something hopeful. She wasn't used to being seen. She wasn't used to being recognized. She wasn't used to anyone paying attention to her. But today, the rest of the school day passed like a blur. She walked through the halls quietly, but she felt different, even if no one else noticed. A small confidence settled in her chest. Not loud or showy, just a gentle glow. When she got home that evening, she placed her school bag on the floor and walked straight to the piano. She didn't sit immediately. She stood before it for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. She touched the side of the piano gently, as if greeting an old friend. Then she sat down and played the piece again, this time not for practice, not for a test, not for teachers. She played for herself. Her fingers moved with ease. Her heart steady, her expression soft and calm. And for the first time, she truly felt something she had never felt before. She felt proud. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know that her performance had started a conversation among the teachers. She didn't know that her music teacher was planning something bigger for her future. She didn't know that her life was slowly shifting in a new direction. All she knew was that she had done something she never thought she could do. And soon, her world was about to open up even more, far more than she ever expected. The morning of the school's annual performance day arrived with a strange mix of excitement and pressure. Everyone in the building seemed to move faster than usual, as if the entire place had been charged with some invisible energy. Teachers rushed around with clipboards in their hands. Students practiced lines in the hallways, and parents began showing up early, hoping to find good seats before the crowd filled the auditorium. Throughout all this chaos, she walked quietly through the hallway with her small music bag held tightly against her side. She wasn't nervous in the usual way, but she felt something stronger, a sense that this day would change something important in her life. She didn't know what exactly, but the feeling sat deep in her chest. Her piano teacher spotted her from the end of the hall and walked over with a proud but gentle smile. The teacher didn't say much, only placed a hand on her shoulder for a moment. It was the kind of silent support she needed. The teacher had seen how hard she had worked, how many hours she had stayed after class practicing scales and fixing tiny mistakes that most people wouldn't even notice. When she entered the auditorium, the room looked much bigger than usual. Rows of chairs stretched out farther than she remembered, and almost every seat was already filled. People talked in low voices, flipping through programs as they waited for the performance to begin. At the front of the room stood the grand piano, polished so well it reflected the soft lights above. She took a deep breath. The sight of that piano always brought her comfort, like seeing an old friend. No matter how loud or busy the world became, the piano never rushed her, never judged her, never asked for anything except honesty. That was something she could give. Behind the stage curtain, students lined up in a long row, waiting for their turn. Some were reciting poems, some stretching for dance performances, and others checking their instruments for the 10th time. She waited patiently, feeling her heart beating a little faster than normal. A few teachers walked around encouraging the students, though there were still some who whispered doubt under their breath. A couple of them glanced at her with raised eyebrows, as if unsure whether she would rise to the occasion or fold under the pressure. They had always underestimated her, and she had come to understand that sometimes adults held hidden expectations. They were quick to defend even when they were wrong. She didn't want to prove anyone wrong. She only wanted to play, to show what music felt like inside her. When her turn finally came, she stepped toward the stage. The small wooden stairs creaked lightly under her feet, and the curtain felt strangely heavy as she walked past it. As soon as she took her place on stage, the room fell into a soft hush. Unlike the hallway, there was no chaos here, only a quiet space waiting for sound. She sat down on the piano bench and adjusted it the way she always did. She placed her fingers on the keys, but didn't start right away. Instead, she took a moment to close her eyes and imagine the story she wanted the music to tell. She wasn't thinking about being perfect or impressing the crowd. She simply wanted the notes to flow the way they did when she practiced alone, when she finally began to play. The first notes were soft and gentle. They floated across the room like small waves, calming the air around her. People leaned forward in their seats, drawn to the quiet strength in her touch. Each note was clear but tender, like she was letting the piano breathe one sound at a time. As the piece continued, the music grew richer, deeper, and more powerful. Her hands moved quickly across the keys, but her expression stayed calm. She wasn't forcing anything, the music poured out naturally, each section connecting to the next like a story unfolding in real time. The room felt smaller, warmer, as if everyone inside was experiencing the same feeling at the same moment. Some of the teachers who had doubted her earlier shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected something simple, something cautious, but this was different. This was a level of skill and emotion they had not prepared themselves to witness. The final part of the piece arrived like a quiet sunrise. It wasn't loud or overpowering, but filled with warmth and confidence. When she played the last note, it lingered in the air for a long moment, before slowly fading away. The room stayed silent. No one moved. It was as if the entire audience had forgotten how to breathe. Then the applause began slow at first. It's almost hesitant, and then growing louder and louder until it filled every corner of the auditorium. People stood up from their seats, clapping with an energy that surprised even themselves. Some of the teachers who doubted her earlier clapped the hardest. Their faces red with embarrassment, mixed with admiration. She stood up from the bench, slightly shy and a little overwhelmed, but also proud. She didn't smile widely. She simply bowed politely before stepping away from the piano. Backstage, students congratulated her with genuine excitement. Even those who usually kept their distance came up to her to say that her performance had given them chills. Her teacher hugged her gently, whispering that she had just shown everyone exactly who she was. But she didn't stay backstage long. She walked out to the nearly empty hallway, needing a little space to breathe. A small window near the corner let in bright afternoon light, and she stood there, letting the warmth settle on her skin. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to truly feel the moment. She had played with everything she had, letting her emotions speak through the keys. Not to impress, not to fight against doubt, simply because music was the language she understood best. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know whether the teachers would treat her differently, or if the performance would change anything at all. But she knew one thing with certainty. She had played honestly, and that honesty had reached the audience, somewhere deep inside. She felt a quiet shift, as if a door had opened to a new path she hadn't seen before. A path she was ready to walk no matter where it led, and without realizing it. This moment had just become the beginning of something much bigger than she ever imagined. The day after the performance, the school felt strangely different. The hallways were still the same, the classrooms still filled with chatter, the teachers still busy with their usual routines. But for her, something had shifted in a quiet but powerful way. People noticed her now, not in an overwhelming or uncomfortable way, but with a gentle kind of respect that hadn't been there before as she walked through the hall toward her classroom. A few students waved at her, some offering shy compliments. She smiled politely, though she still felt a little unsure about all the attention. She had never played music to be admired. She played because it was a part of who she was. When she reached her classroom, her teacher greeted her with a warm expression. There was no long speech or big announcement, only an understanding look that said, "Well done." And somehow, that simple gesture meant more to her than any applause. Later in the day, during her music period, she returned to the familiar room where she had practiced so many hours. The piano sat in the corner, waiting quietly. It almost felt like it was calling her. She walked toward it with a soft smile, taking a seat on the same bench she had used for years. Her teacher entered the room behind her, carrying a folder filled with sheet music. The teacher placed it on the piano, but didn't open it immediately. Instead, she sat on the chair beside the piano and watched the girl's hands rest lightly on the keys. "You played beautifully yesterday," the teacher said gently. "But I want you to know something important. What made your performance special wasn't the difficulty of the piece or the way your fingers moved. It was the feeling you put into it. That cannot be taught. It comes from within you." The girl listened silently, letting the words sink in. "I've watched you for a long time," the teacher continued. "You don't push to be seen, and you don't try to compete with anyone. You simply play because the music speaks to you. That is rare, and it's something you must protect." The girl nodded slowly. She didn't fully understand everything yet, but she knew the teacher meant every word. Then the teacher opened the folder and pulled out a new sheet of music. It was longer than anything the girl had played before, notes scattered across the page like stars in a crowded sky. "I want you to try this," the teacher said. "Not because you need to impress anyone, but because I think you're ready for something new." The girl studied the sheet, feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity. She loved challenges, especially when they came from someone who believed in her. Her fingers touched the keys again. She began softly, not trying to get it perfect. The first few notes came out unsteady, unsure, but she kept going, repeating the beginning until the melody started to make sense. The teacher watched her with a look of quiet pride. As the days passed, She practiced the new piece every afternoon after school. She didn't rush. She didn't worry about mistakes. She simply let the music grow inside her. Some days she made quick progress, and other days she felt stuck. But she stayed patient with herself, trusting that every small step mattered. Meanwhile, the story of her performance at the school assembly continued to spread. Teachers from other grades stopped her in the hall to compliment her. Some suggested she join competitions or perform for special events. She listened politely, grateful but unsure. She didn't want her music to turn into something stressful or heavy. She wanted it to stay pure, something that came from her heart. One afternoon, while she practiced, the door of the music room opened quietly. A group of younger students peeked inside, whispering to each other. They watched her play with wide eyes, amazed by her calm focus. When she finished the section she was working on, she turned to them with a gentle smile. "Do you want to come in?" she asked. The younger students nodded eagerly and stepped inside. They sat on the floor near the piano, waiting as if they were about to hear a secret. She played a small, simple melody for them, not the complicated new piece, but something gentle and easy to follow. The children listened with complete attention, their eyes shining. "You make it sound like the piano is talking," one of them said. She laughed softly. "Sometimes it does. You just have to listen closely." Moments like this reminded her why she loved music so much. It wasn't about being talented or surprising people. It was about connection, about allowing music to bring a sense of peace, wonder, or joy to others. Weeks passed, and her new piece grew smoother under her fingers. It wasn't perfect yet, but she could feel it slowly becoming part of her. Her teacher noticed too and often smiled when listening from the back of the room. Then one day, something unexpected happened. After school, the principal called her to the office. She walked in quietly, unsure of why she had been called. The principal smiled warmly and handed her a letter. "This is for you," the principal said. "You impressed many people with your performance. Nearby Music Academy heard about you and they've invited you to visit their campus. No pressure, just an invitation to explore." She froze for a moment, staring at the letter in her hands. She had never imagined something like this. A music academy. Felt unreal. "You don't have to decide anything now," the principal added. "But I want you to know, we're all proud of you." She walked out of the office with the letter pressed gently against her chest. The hallway felt unusually quiet as she stepped outside the school building. The late afternoon sun touched everything with a golden glow, and for a moment she just stood there, taking in the air. That evening she sat by the small window in her room, holding the letter and thinking about everything that had happened since the performance. She remembered the applause, the smiles, the doubtful teachers changing their expressions, the younger students listening to her play, and her teacher's kind words. She realized something important. Her life had not changed because she shocked people. Her life had changed because she stayed true to herself, quiet, steady, and sincere. She didn't need to rush into big decisions. She didn't need to chase fame or prove anything to anyone. What mattered most was continuing to grow, continuing to learn, and continuing to let music speak the way it always had. She placed the letter safely on her desk and sat down at her small keyboard. Her fingers rested gently on the keys as she began playing the first notes of the new piece she had been practicing. The melody filled the room, soft and warm, echoing her thoughts. She knew now that her journey was just beginning, whether she chose to visit the academy or not, whether she performed again on a big stage or simply played for herself. She would carry one truth inside her. Her talent was not something that could be tested, measured, or limited by anyone. It was a light that would keep growing as long as she protected it. And with every note she played, that light grew a little brighter, guiding her toward a future she was finally ready to face with quiet confidence and an open heart.